Okay, hello guys. Finally, it is last but not least, we will discuss and learn together about the history of English literature. Okay, this is the 21st era. It is the era we're living today. Of course, this video doesn't cover all the events that occurred at this time and is not as detailed as the past era or the previous era. Because, of course, it is too early in the century to begin appropriately to define context and condition in detail. Okay, first we will see the condition or some important events that occurred in this era. First, Twin Towers in New York attacked by terrorists on September 11th, 2001. American being the target of terrorism. The attacks had a huge impact in every sense, emotionally, culturally, politically, and all over the world. Imaginative response to it went through stages of shock, grief, anger, and assimilation. This attack immediately became a reference point for artists and writers of all kinds. For example, the book titled The Second Plan by Martin Amis. Next, the economic crash or economic crisis happened in 2008. This happened because the impact of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and the war on terror have all contributed to create the particular atmosphere of the early years of the 21st century. And in 2009, Barack Obama elected as the first US African American president. Okay, now we move to the characteristic of the literature. The imaginative writing. In 21st era, the writer develops imaginative writing and often breaks the traditional writing. New genres has developed such as creative nonfiction, hyper poetry, graphic novels, and flash fiction or short story. Next, the writer past work are widely read and popular. The writer doesn't always gain popularity in the times of their life. It could be that after he or she died, the work became popular. And in this era, the women written became the major writers. Many of the great writers of our time happen to be women. The works written by women have been widely studied and considered very natural. There is no longer any difference between male and female writers, and many male writers also happen to write well about women. Okay, now we move to the literary works and the authors. First, about the prose. In prose, various problems arise and come to the attention of the writers. This issue includes the anti-war protests against environmental pollution, and public or people is increasingly aware of the impact of pollution. More literary works discussing this matter are being produced, and the history remains a major concern of English literature. The writers still tend to look back. Although they have entered the new millennium, the authors seem to find a larger imaginative stimulus in the past than in the present and the future. And many of the major writers of the final decades of the 20th century have continued to expand their range and achievements, such as Martin Amis, Salman Rushdie, Alan Bennett, and J.K. Rowling. And among the roll call of the novelists whose reputation have burgeoned in the 21st century. Okay, now we will see together about one of the most famous authors in prose, Irvine Welsh. He is a Scottish novelist. He gave his views on the change of perception as regards politics in the United Kingdom between the Thatcherians, largely in the 1980s, and the early years of the new century. He said that the era had been about selfishness and greed. The why was important. The why then was small and bitty and fearful. With too many people eager to embrace the false certainties that matter and asserted links bleeded out. His novel Transporting, that published in 1993, has held its place as a definitive text of the 1990s. This novel was adapted as a play. It shows something of how perception have changed over recent decades. Perception of politics, of violence, of international interdependence, of gender, of poverty and wealth, and all of these have undergone some pretty radical shift in the Western world. Okay, now we move to the poetry. In this era, some poets become very significant public figures. Many are, of course, interchanging vibe. But poetry often distances itself from the quotidian, probing the eternal values, although often from the stimulus of actual present-day events. Poetry is often seen as the genre that can come close to the true rendering of nature. Okay, the famous poets Carol and Davy. Davy is a woman poet and playwright that became the first Scottish-born poet and the first known written about the LGBT. In 2009, she has become Poet Laureate of Great Britain. Her poems address issues such as oppression, gender, and violence. Duffy poetry for the last surviving victims of the World War I. The Last Post is a key text of our time, bringing together themes of war and the role of the artist in documenting centuries in a country that is at war more often than ever before. Since the turn of the millennium, there has been a flourishing new drama for the theater as well as for television and the cinema. Drama has had something of a golden age, despite the recession and cutbacks, and it flourished in tiny fringe theaters as well as in the established of London and provincial centers. It has become one genre to voice the social problems of the new century. One of most famous playwrights is David Harry. His work Stuff Happens is a political commentary about the Iraq War. Okay, guys, in the end, I want to say that the literary works that written and published in the past, its works are much liked by the public or people in nowadays. It tries to show that the human life doesn't matter how different they are, like the way of life or the technology differences, but there are always things in common in every era, such as poverty, conflicts, victories and defeats, struggle of life, and others. Okay, that's all. Thank you, guys.